and just impacted by these storms and lives lost, in fact. Amazing. As I reflected on our passage this week, I thought about those storms because in our passage, Jesus and his disciples are caught in a storm, in a very violent storm. They were terrified. They were afraid they were going to lose their lives. But I tell you, the terror they felt in the storm was nothing compared to the terror they felt when the storm was calmed by Jesus. Let me show you what I mean. Let's read together Mark chapter 4, our passage, verse 35. That day, when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall, storm came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Jesus got up. He rebuked the wind and he said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Don't you still have any faith? You still have no faith?" And they were terrified. And they asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." A violent storm broke out in the Sea of Galilee that night. And this was not an unusual thing, I understand, because the Sea of Galilee lies 700 feet below sea level between the mountains, and often temperature inversions will cause these storms to arise in the evenings. And those who are familiar with the Sea of Galilee, fishermen and the like, and those who live there know about this even to this day. But this experience was very different for several reasons. Let me share a few reasons it was so different. Number one, this storm was extremely violent. It was a furious squall, the Bible says. Matthew adds that it came up without warning. The waves broke over the boat so the boat was swamped. It was filled with water, and the disciples were sure that they were going to lose their lives. They were going to drown that very night. It was a furious storm, one like they had never seen before. The second thing that was different, though, about this storm is that Jesus was in their boat. Jesus was in their boat. On another occasion, Jesus came walking to the disciples on the water. You remember that occasion? That's the time that Peter asked to get out and walk on the water. That was another time. This is a different occasion. Jesus is in the boat with them. He's exhausted from a long day of teaching and preaching and ministering to people. He's exhausted. He is sleeping in the back of the boat in the middle of the storm. He is sleeping in the storm. I don't get that. I don't get that. I'm a scaredy cat of certain things. I remember there was once I was with, in 8th grade, a friend's family took me down to Mexico, the Gulf of California, on a sailing trip. And we were going out, it was about a 35-foot sailboat, and we're just heading out of the harbor, and the wind was a little gusty that day, and already, just in the harbor, we're experiencing 3-foot squalls, and I'm turning green. And I said, "We're going out in this today? No way! Put me on the shore." And so, we canceled the trip for that day just because of me. I have a fear of flying as well. I mean, there's a number of little phobias I have, but I'll do it, but I really don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy the takeoffs and the landings, which pretty much cancels out flying. And I remember one particular time we were on this trip, and my mom and dad were with me, and they're sitting 2 or 3 seats behind me and Susan on the airplane, and some turbulence came up. That's another thing I don't like, turbulence. Turbulence came up, of course I'm turning white and green again and gripping the seat, and what made it even worse, I hear this voice from way back behind me is my mom, and she says, "Russ, are you okay?" And everybody on the airplane looks at me, of course, embarrassed. Anyway, thanks, Mom. Appreciate that. No moms are. Anyway, I don't get. Jesus was sleeping in the back of the boat, but that's the story. Now, another thing about this story I want you to see is that Jesus was sleeping so soundly that his disciples had to wake him. What did they say? "Jesus, don't you care? Don't you care if we drown?" Now, I don't know what they expected Jesus to do when they woke him up, They certainly didn't expect him to do what he did, you can tell from the story. And they weren't really asking him to do anything. They were kind of accusing him. That's the impression I get. They were kind of accusing him in a veiled sort of way. Don't you care? Hey, Jesus, come on. Look at the storm. We're about to drown here. We're about to lose our lives here. Don't you understand? Don't you care? And of course we would say Jesus cares. Of course he cares. We know he cares. But sometimes, frankly, it doesn't seem that way, does it? When you're in the middle of the storm, when your boat is about to sink, when you're swamped, when you're afraid, when life tumbles in, a world crashes in, you feel helpless, you feel alone, and it feels like God is nowhere to be found. And it feels like you pray and there's nothing happening. Sometimes it feels like God is very, very far away. And that feeling, you see it. You see it in the Bible even. You see it in people in the Bible who were very close to God. They knew God, and still in those moments they were afraid. Like this passage in Psalm 22, 1 and 2. Jesus quoted this on the cross, didn't he? He said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from me? So far from the cries of my anguish. My God, I cry out by day, and you do not answer by night. And I find no rest. Job, remember Job, and the troubles he went through. He said in Job 30, verse 20, I cry out to you, God, but you do not answer. I stand up, but you only look at me. God, do something. Verse 26 and 27, Job 30. Job says, yet I hope for good. When I hope for good, what happened? Evil came. When I look for light, then came the darkness. The churning inside me never stops. Days of suffering overwhelm me, they overtake me. Have you ever felt that way? When it seems like your world is so dark and you pray for God to be there and it just doesn't seem like he is. Verse 31, Job closes that. He says, my lyre is tuned to mourning. My lyre is tuned to mourning, and my pipe to the sound of wailing. So this was a terrible storm. Jesus was there, but it didn't seem like God was even listening to them. They're afraid they're going to die. But the fourth thing I want you to see is how terrified these men were when Jesus did something about it. This is really the crux of the story, and I want you to see this. Mark 4, verse 39 again. Jesus got up. When they woke him up, he got up. He rebuked the wind, and he said to the waves, quiet, hush, be still. And then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. I've always been amazed by that passage. Here's inanimate nature. Here's the sea, the wind, and the waves, listening to the voice of God, the voice of the Creator, and yet often we don't. Here we are, the ones who are made in the image of God, filled with the Spirit of God, and yet sometimes we don't hear, do we? We don't listen, but they did. Isn't that interesting? Verse 40. And he said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? They were terrified. They asked each other, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Terrified. They were terrified by the storm, but they were even more terrified when Jesus calmed the storm. Now, doesn't that seem odd to you? I mean, I would have been elated, thrilled. I mean, the turbulence is gone, the danger is gone, the fear is gone, we're not going to drown, yay, God! You know? But that's not how they felt at all. They were terrified by Jesus. By Jesus. They were terrified by Jesus. Who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him? Who are we dealing with here? They were starting to realize that they were in the presence of no ordinary man, no common healer or miracle worker. This man in their boat could command the wind and the water, and they would obey him instantly. Be still, and boom, they're gone. They're still, completely calm. Who does that? Who does that, church? God, that's right. God does that. The one who made the wind. The one who made the seas, the one who made the waves, God. The disciples were beginning to understand that they were in the presence of an all-powerful and completely holy God. And that's not always a very comforting thought, because you see, God is holy and we are not. Right? Right? God is perfect. We are not. God is all goodness and greatness. We are not. We don't measure up to God. We're not even close. And so sometimes in His presence, we can feel greatly intimidated or inadequate, afraid, or terrified. Holiness, we like holiness. We like it from a distance, though. Okay, it's okay, God. You be holy. That's fine. Just don't come near to me. Because I am not. He is holy, and we are far from it. But I want you to see something else here. The problem here was not with Jesus being God. It was with the disciples and their faith. You see what Jesus said? They were terrified. Jesus said, do you not have faith? Do you not understand? Do you still have no faith? Now, I want you to understand something here. Faith is not just believing in God. Faith is knowing God. The reason we believe in God is because we know Him. And because we know Him, we trust Him because we know Him. So we fear that which we don't understand. Isn't that true in your life? Are there things that you don't understand that you're a little afraid of? I'm that way with electricity. That's why I asked JJ to come do all my electrical problems with me, or Doug, or somebody knows electricity, because I'm a little afraid of electricity. I love it. But I stand in dread of electricity, so I'm very, very cautious with electricity. I know because I've almost burned my house down before with electricity. And sitting on that plane one time, I was on that plane that I'm already kind of afraid of, and there's a pilot sitting near me. And I'm watching this pilot, okay? I'm taking my cues from the pilot. So we hit a little turbulence, and the pilot was just flying. I mean, he's just, no problem. And I'm going, He's not afraid at all. Why? Because he knows that airplane. He knows, I don't even see why the wings stay on an airplane. I don't even understand how it flies. But he knows, because he knows he can be completely calm. That's what I'm saying about faith. Faith is when we know God, we know Him. Because we know Him, we can feel confident and assured and at peace, because we know that He loves us. We know that He came near to us. We know that He loves us so much that He'll never desert us, no matter how terrifying the night, no matter how strong the storm. We know that only He can calm the storm, and He will. So if you have that kind of knowing faith, it's comforting to know that Jesus is in your boat. And that He will deal with the storm because He is God. He is the maker of the wind and the waves, the master of the universe. And He's in your boat by choice. He's the one that came here. And He got in that boat by His own choice. He didn't come to make us afraid. He didn't come to scare us to death. He came to calm our fears. He came near to show us who God is. And to show us how much this God cares for us and loves us, even in the storms of life. Even when we're going through the most difficult days of our lives, we can know that God is there if we have that kind of knowing faith. And He came to show us, too, that one day God will calm every storm that we encounter. He may not do it right now, but someday He will calm every storm. All the miracles that Jesus did were signs of what is to come. They were signs of the coming kingdom of God, that someday all the storms will be taken away. All the death, all the drowning, all the dying, all the hurts, all the fears, all of that will be taken away by the power of God. I don't want you today to let that kind of faith, let that kind of knowing, understanding faith calm you in your storms. Give you peace in your turmoil. Because who is this that's sleeping in our boat? Who is it? It is the great I Am, the Alpha and Omega. This is the creator of the universe. This is the master of the earth. This is the Lion of Judah. This is the sacrifice for our sin. This is the spoiler of Satan's plans, the victor over death. This is the one who will never leave us, never forsake us, not even in the face of death. This is the coming King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This is God sleeping in your boat. This is God sleeping in your boat, and all is well with my soul. Well, I asked So I want to come and share with us just a little bit today in our last remaining moments of our message today about how Jesus has calmed the storms in her life, and then we'll close it out. Christy, would you come?
Thanks, Russ, for this opportunity to share. I think it's important to have testimony because testimony is all about relaying what God has done in your life with other people. And then faith is increased. And so that's what my hope is today, is that what I share with you today, your faith can be increased by what I witnessed in my life and what we witnessed as a family. Before I get into the first scenario that I want to share with you, I want to share a little bit of history. Our family had a ritual, a routine of praying together in the evening. But prayer wasn't just about praying before we went to bed or praying at meal times. Prayer was a part of the DNA of who we were as a family as we raised our children. And so an emergency vehicle would go by and I might stop and say, hey, let's sit down and pray for those people. Or we were caught in a rainstorm one time. We were supposed to be getting out and looking at tulips in Pella at tulip time, and we were excited to be there. I just out loud said, hey, Lord, could you please let it quit raining? And the kids were so excited because it did stop raining, and we got to go. But it became a part of who we were as a family, prayer. And so when we went through cancer with Jared, for 4 years he battled cancer. And through that whole time, I can't tell you how many times we prayed as a family and with Jared and over the doctors and on and on and on. It was a big part of who we were. And so that will come out in this story. The other part of our history that I want to share with you is that Jared's cancer was, it was called osteosarcoma. It's a bone cancer. It's a pediatric cancer that is very aggressive. And so when his treatment was passed on to us, we learned very quickly it was a very aggressive treatment. And he was extremely nauseous and very sick. We lost a ton of weight. He didn't have much to lose to begin with. He was a skinny little kid, and he was skin and bones. He just really, really suffered with this, with the treatment. That's part of the reason why I'm just such an advocate for finding a cure for cancer, because the treatment itself can kill a person. And so it got him to near-death experiences far beyond what we expected when we first started this whole thing. So anyway, the first few sessions of chemotherapy, well, first of all, let me explain that we lived 3.5 hours from the hospital. That was not easy. So every time Jared had to have a treatment, it was an inpatient. He had to be in the hospital prior to, during, and after his treatment. And so we were there the first year of his cancer treatment. We were inpatient for nearly 9 months. So that tells you how much time we spent at the hospital. Jared and I traded places. So I was there 4 days a week. He was there 3 days a week. Sometimes it was reversed. But he was a full-time pastor, and so he needed to be preparing his sermons, and the church was so gracious and helped us with that, gave him a little lighter load. So we were really well taken care of by the church. However, so during this, during the first 3 sessions of his treatment, the first 3 chemotherapy sessions, they had not quite figured out how to manage his nausea. And so he was sick, and it was just devastating and hard to watch, and we had a hard time knowing what to do. But after that 3rd session, we were able to bring him home, and he was able to rest at home and kind of get his wits about him again and the courage to go back. And at that point, we had not, the doctors had not made the decision to put a feeding tube in, and so, which they did later. So we were at home with the only way to control his nausea by pill. And so I would give him a pill and he would throw it up. And I would give him a pill and he would throw it up. And I didn't know what to do. We were just, this one evening, we got to a place where we were like, I don't know what to do next. He just keeps throwing everything up and we can't hold anything down. We had already spent a couple nights in a local hospital after the second session of his treatment. And that local hospital was not exactly pediatric. They did not know how to handle Jared's cancer. He was a kid, he had cancer. They were dealing with other, minor emergencies and things like that. It was a small local hospital. And so they always had to consult our hospital that was 3.5 hours away, the Children's Hospital, to know what to do with him. So I didn't want to go back there. And so this particular night, Jared was so sick, he was weak, he wouldn't hold anything down, and Darren and I were just at our end. We did not know what to do. Darren was pacing and rubbing his hands and not knowing what to do, and I was frantically looking through all of our meds and trying to figure out what to do next, and should I try this, should we do it again? He threw it up. It was just this crazy scenario that we just did not know what to do. Alex was sitting right next to his brother and just comforting him and sitting there and trying to be a support in the situation. And Darren and I, for some reason, forgot that Jesus was in our boat. We were just thinking, this is up to us. We've got to make this decision. Our child's fate is in our hands, and that's where we were in our head. Both of us were thinking, what can we do to solve this situation? We couldn't think of anything else but that. And Jared, just out of total desperation, reached over and smacked Alex on the wrist and grabbed his arm and said, "Just pray, Alex, just pray." And all of us just stopped. We just stopped. The pacing stopped. The thinking of what can I do next stopped. And we sat down and Alex led a very beautiful prayer. Praying for wisdom, praying for health, praying for us to get through this storm that we were in. We recalled that Jesus was in our boat. We went, oh, that's right. Why didn't we think of that? And so Darren and I sat down and we held hands and Alex prayed. In the middle of the prayer, Darren had to open his eyes and saw a scene that we had never seen before. Jared was not a physically active worshiper, I'll put it that way. He didn't raise his hands, he didn't clap, he sang, he was, involved. He played drums, but he was not one to physically be very animated during worship. And in that moment, when Darren opened his eyes during our prayer, he saw that Jared had his arms raised, and so he nudged me to look. And the both of us finished our prayer watching Jared raise his hands straight up to the Lord. And it reminded me of a little child that stands before their parents because they just want to be held. Just, "Mommy, hold me, Daddy, hold me." He was reaching out to his good Father to hold him, to take care of him, to calm our storm. And that was amazing to see. I will never forget that picture. And Alex finished the prayer, and Jared took a deep breath, and he said, "Okay, give me a pill." And I went, "Okay." So I gave him one of our arsenal of pills, and he took it, and he kept it down. And then he said, "Give me a peanut butter sandwich." I said, "Okay." So I went and got a peanut butter sandwich, and he held it down. And our storm that day ended. And it was a breath of fresh air. And there was no going to the hospital. We could stay home, and we could relax, and we could enjoy our time together as a family. So, not every storm ends like that, right? I mean, we still had to endure cancer. We still had to get through our son dying of cancer. And we are still wrestling with all of that. But in the end, we know that all the storms on this earth are temporary. They don't last. Cancer did not last in my son's body because he's eternally with the healer. And so that's the hope that we claim no matter what storm we are dealing with here. And the hope that Jesus walks through those storms with us and holds our hand through all of those storms. So the next scenario I want to share with you was at the end of Jared's life. Here when we lived living in Brighton, Jared had to come home from the hospital on hospice. By this point, we have battled cancer for 4 years. So Jared was diagnosed at 12 years old, and he died a month before he was supposed to turn 16. So for 4 years, we really struggled with cancer. For about 11 months in the middle of that, he was cancer-free. And so that was in Nova Scotia. We had a really good time during that time, rejoicing and relaxing and ministering to the community there. But his cancer returned, and it returned in his lungs. So he actually had bone cancer that was lodged in his lungs that metastasized and took over his body, and that's what took his life. So at the end, we had to go home with hospice care, and we had him propped up in a hospital bed in the middle of our living room, and we all took time to sit by him and take care of him. And on this one particular occasion, we had a very, very sweet young lady that was our hospice nurse, and Jared was her very first patient. I can't imagine that experience being her first, but she was very touched by our family, and she became kind of a part of our family. I began to love her and appreciate her, and her tenderness and her care to us was very valuable. But she had to come and do a procedure that was very difficult for us to watch with Jared. I did not know this, but when she turned Jared over, there were 3 very large bed sores on his back. And I hadn't seen those yet, I didn't know. And so when I saw that, it was absolutely shocking and devastating to me. I couldn't believe that he had been laying there with these open wounds on his back. And along with everything that was going on inside him, the pain that was overtaking his body, there was also that. And so as a mom, you hate to see your kids suffer, right? It's a horrible experience. And this was probably the depth of that for me. And so she was taking care of Jared, working on this procedure with him to help him. But I couldn't take it. I was watching, and to me it was uncomfortable. I kept thinking that Jared was uncomfortable. Darren and I were bedside with Jared, helping him to get through it. But I got to a place where, this is very uncharacteristic of me, but I said, "Just stop it! Leave him alone! I can't take this anymore. I just can't take it." And Darren grabbed me by the shoulders and he said, "Why don't you take a break? Just go upstairs. I've got this. You just take a break." This was a major storm for me. I was very upset. I was very I was very overcome with the fact that my son has suffered enough. Why? Why do we have to keep on? I just couldn't take it anymore. And so I went upstairs and I just bawled. And I laid down on the floor and I put my stomach to the floor. I just lay prostrate on the floor before the Lord. And I out loud said, Lord, I just can't take this anymore. I can't take it. Please, just take him. Just take him. He's suffered enough, and it was really the first time that I had asked God to take him. But I said, I can't take it. I don't want him to have to suffer anymore. I'm done. And I just buried my hands my head in my hands, and I just cried and cried and cried. And I took a deep breath and laid there in quiet for a minute. And up from the basement, I heard my sons singing. Lyndon and Alex were singing in the basement. And these are the words that I heard. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul.
Amen.
Those words washed over me like I had never heard them before. When sorrows like sea billows roll, think about that storm on the sea. It is well with my soul because Jesus is in my boat. He's in my boat. And that is the truth that washed over me in that moment. I let that just sink in. I said, okay, God, I can do all things through you. You're the one who strengthens me. And I got up off the floor and I dried my eyes and I went back downstairs and I apologized to that sweet nurse who was just doing what she needed to do. And I kissed my kid on the forehead and I went downstairs and I opened the door to where the boys were singing. And I let that music just come up the stairwell into the room where we were. And that sweet nurse, I found out that day, was a believer. And she sat down beside me and we worshiped together. We worshiped. So we came to the throne room of God together. Despite the storm, despite the inevitable truth that my son was going to die, we believed that Jesus was with us. And that is what gets you through it. That is what gets you through it. Like I said, everything on this earth is temporary. Even our physical lives is temporary. And so if we believe in that hope that the major storm, the big storm that is being waged for your soul, if we believe that Jesus is the conqueror and he has put that storm to rest, then we have that hope that is in eternity. And we hold to that truth that we are going to see our sons again, and that we're going to be with Jesus forever, and there is no tears, and there is no cancer, and that we can hang on to that truth is what gets you from one storm to the next. That is what gets us through. So I'm so excited that we're going to sing the new version of that. But we're going to end with some powerful scripture that has meant a lot to me as well.
Thank you, Christy. It's incredibly hard to share. Thank you for sharing it. It's hard for me to listen to. But we all go through storms, don't we? We're all going to go through storms. If you haven't yet, you will. That Jesus is in our life. Jesus is there with us. Praise God for that. And here's the scriptures I wanted to share with you, that we want to share with you. Psalm 46, 1 through 3. Listen. God is our refuge and our strength, and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. And And then Psalm 34, verse 15. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cry. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. That's what you felt. That's what you felt. That's what we'll feel at times. But God is there. He's in our boat. And someday he'll take away all those pains, all the cancer, all the hurt, all the fears, and be with him forever. Praise God. I just want to ask you today if Jesus Christ is in your boat. If he is, then you can have that peace that passes understanding, that strength that overcomes any storm of life. And if he's not, he wants to be. He wants to be in your boat. And today you have a chance to let him be in your boat, to believe in him with all your heart, give your life to him, confess that you need him, and he'll be there for you. He wants to be there for you. He volunteered for the job. He wants to be there in your boat, in your storms, and calm your fears. If you need him in any way, we're going to have a prayer team down here on the side, down here where we sing this last song. If you need help in any way, please come. Let's all stand right now. Let's sing this song together. Powerful song.